My heart is my sacred space. It's not externally dependent, it is internally abundant.
Every now is sacred, and our ability to be present is accessing it at another level.
Then we have the opportunity to come into alignment with our body, with our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, and our soul, so that we can create with intention from that sacred space.
Everything that we do has a level of sacredness because it is inherently divine.
My sacred space is different because it's part of my own personal growth journey.
I didn't have a sacred space because I was just so scattered, and I was just attempting to grab onto anything that made me happy, without awareness of how much of what I was doing was actually making me unhappy.
Hi, I'm Amber Mikesell, founder of Suivera, host of the Heart Leader podcast, and author of this amazing book, Silence Your Inner Critic. And I'm excited to share that this awesome little guide is now available for pre-order. You can head on over to silenceyourinnercritic.com and pre-order your copy now. Or you can pop on over to wherever you enjoy ordering books, like Barnes and Noble, and just type in the title, Silence Your Inner Critic, and find your copy there. As soon as you place your pre-order, send us a copy, a digital screenshot, or just a notification showing us your receipt, and email that over to info@suivera.org, and brace yourself for a lot of amazing gifts from me over the course of the next few weeks as you wait for your copy to arrive in the mail. I can't wait to start this epic journey with you. Recently, I have had a lot more conversations with individuals one-on-one who are in service to other individuals, which is such a gift for me. I love hearing different styles and different approaches, and how we're all committed to being in service to one another. But through this process, I'm also hearing in the approaches that individuals are taking this misstep in some ways of where someone is and where we, as those who are guiding them, desire them to be, right? And it's so easy as a guide. It is not like I'm discounting this at all, because it's so easy to do that. We see the end goal and we just want to pick people up and carry them to where we know they can grow so much in this deep, rich experience. But it's like a baby bird coming out of the egg, right? Part of this growth is in the process of pushing your way through. And in that, it's creating that sacred space to hold for this individual, telling them how, helping to guide them through the process, but not doing it for them. And sharing with them, like, this is even how you can create your own sacred space as you continue to physically grow, spiritually grow, emotionally grow. But we can't do it for you, and you can't do it for others on their growth process. So I would love to dive into, what is sacred space? How do you create sacred space? And as a guide, why is that so important to know? Whether you're a coach, a life coach, a health coach, a mental coach, there are all these different things that we do, or you're in the therapist realm. Like, why is that so important? Or let's get out of all those realms, and as a parent, or as somebody who leads someone a job, or just leading your own life, really, right? So, what are your feels? What are your thoughts on that?
So yeah, we're familiar with sacred texts, sacred buildings, sacred sites, land, for example. But how often are we viewing sacred as not just an external thing, but you can view it as external in terms of the body, and then internal as in kind of the soul in that sense. But it also could be the emotional, it could be mental. There are other aspects of the internal. And so I'm really excited to kind of dive into this today and really highlight some areas and different ways that we viewed things, because having these sacred spaces are really important. It's been a part of human history for thousands of years. I mean, we even see them today. They're literally sacred sites right now that we're still exploring. We're still seeking to understand. And we don't even know what some of them even mean or what they were used for, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the fun of it. And so there's a little bit of mystery to it, and that's always enjoyable.
Go Graham Hancock,
Yeah,
right?
exactly, exactly. But yeah, how do we take something that seems to be a part of the very DNA of humanity, the desire to make something sacred, and then how do we create that for ourselves? How do we create a sacred space for ourselves?
Yes. And so I want to dive into why is it, number one, why is it important? Like, we can talk about, well, I guess maybe the first question is, what is it? Which would lead to why is it important, right? What is sacred space? And when I began attending meditations or going to sound healing, right? That was a big one for me. I would hear create sacred space. And I never heard that when I was coming up through church but it's the same. It's just called something different. So what I would offer sacred space is that calm, safe space for personal exploration, whether that is physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. You have created a place where you feel so aligned and so connected in the present moment and with yourself that it is easy to align with spirit, with your form, your body, to understand what your body might be telling you, because you are not your body. When you leave this world, regardless of what you believe, right, what religion you may happen to practice, or whether you're agnostic, atheist, all of those, we know that when we leave this plane of existence, we're not taking our body with us. So we know we are not our body. But when we get to that sacred place and that sacred space that we create, then we have the opportunity to come into alignment with our body, come into alignment with our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, and our soul, and what all else we feel like coming into alignment with, so that we can create with intention from that sacred space. And I feel as though when I was very connected to the Christian faith, we did that in prayer or in our youth groups. That was the purpose and the point. And then when I shifted and all of the other different faiths, there was some capacity of sacred space that it was a focus to be created so that you could come into that alignment. We just called it by different names. The purpose was always the same. But we don't have to do that only when we're in those settings. We can create that sacred space when we're completely by ourselves, right? So that's what I would offer creating sacred space is. Would you have any other view on that or anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a beautiful explanation. And I feel you hit on something really important, and that is intention. To me, when I feel through what is a sacred space, whether it's a text or land, or I mean, it could be something as informal, like people say their kitchen is their sacred space, right? Because what is the intention behind it? It's to bring people together. Or um, you know, sacred places in ancient religions were not only to bring people together, but maybe there were certain rituals. Maybe there were um, it was giving thanks or gratitude, or there's so many different ways that we can approach it, right? But each one, the common thread across the board to me is intention. So I feel that you bringing that up in the way that you expressed it is key. And it really, really is. And so when we're thinking about sacred spaces, that intentionality is to me what can define it. It doesn't have to be, it can be formal, it can be informal, it can be, whatever you want it to be. And I know for me, like a lot of when I hear sacred spaces, it's just a natural thing to want to make it formal. And so it's fun for me to kind of expand outside of that and recognize that, for me, I love our kitchen as a sacred space, as I was bringing up, or even like the couch to just sit down and watch a movie. Like, I love movies. I just love getting immersed in it. The intention behind it is for me to relax and get a break and be fully immersed into a story. I really enjoy that. So to me, that is a sacred space. And so it's just nice to be able to have the informality as well as some of the formal spaces, like a meditation space, for example, can be very, very informative. So we can get into that in a little bit, but I just want to kind of give some examples that are to kind of break that mold of this formality around sacred places
Yeah.
or sacred
And
spaces.
and I think that that is important too, to differentiate. When we say sacred space and holding sacred space, you have sacred locations, right? Which we have as a collective deemed as sacred sites. But to me, there's a difference between those sacred sites, which were very intentional and purposeful for those who created them, and we are still honoring the sacred nature of those sites, right? But that is different than us creating our own sacred space for our own growth. Because while I am in such honor of the sacred spaces that I got to visit in India while I was there, or I visited down in South America, or throughout Mexico, or all the places I've had the honor of visiting and being in their sacred temples or their sacred homage to their ancestors. That to me is honoring the sacredness of their people who had an impact on my own collective consciousness. But that's not my sacred space. My sacred space is different because it's part of my own personal growth journey. So to honor my sacred space, that contributes, but it isn't my sacred space. And as you have stated, like your sacred space is being on a sofa watching a movie. For many people, it'd be like, well, how is that a sacred space? Which we can talk about in the why, like why have a sacred space. But we have to understand, like, what is a sacred space to us? What is our own sacredness for us that brings us into that alignment where we do feel that fluidness between all aspects of self, where we can intentionally create then from that fluid connection. And if that does include a sacred site, because that's where you feel the most in alignment, then that's a beautiful gift. And that site holds something for you. But if you show up at that site and you're like, okay, I am not feeling this, is there something wrong with me? There is nothing wrong with you. That simply means that that's not your sacred space. And it's up to each of us to determine what is our sacred space.
Mhm. Yeah, maybe another way to view it as a frequency.
Hmm.
And because that's whether it's an internal space or an external, meaning the body, um, or even external of that, like a different another layer of the external being a site or a location. Um, there is a frequency that is being held, and and the frequency is the intention, right? Or they kind of play off of each other. Intention can set a frequency, and when someone says, "Oh, I'm going to hold space for you," well, it's like holding a frequency, right? It's in this space of, let's say, we're looking for love and or compassion, right? Maybe you want to share something, and so, like, I'm going to hold sacred space for you as you're flowing through something. And so, my intention is to hold the space, the frequency of compassion and love, so that you can navigate what you're navigating in a safe space.
Yeah. And for me, that's what I would say. My sacred, when I say what is sacred space for me, my heart is my sacred space.
Mm,
What is sacred space for me? It is dropping into my heart center
mm,
because that's with me wherever I go. And it's not externally dependent, it is internally abundant. And so if I am having some type of response to my external environment, I can very quickly go, I just need my sacred space for a moment. And I can invoke that heart centered sacred space. But you're right, there's a frequency that is aligned to. And you can amplify that for me. So you can hold that sacred space with me and we can connect in it. Right.
absolutely.
So that is what I would say, what I would offer sacred space is. That's my definition, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and it's for many, it could just be their home in in a place where the world outside feels really chaotic. It could be like, well, a home is like an extension of my internal, and so I feel very safe, and this is like a sacred space for me because not everyone is quite ready to have that deep dive and understanding into their own heart yet. And so there are steps into doing that. And so when you can be more intentional, every step of an awareness of intention and consciousness around that intention can draw us deeper internally to get to a point where you're talking about where one's heart, which might be the source of it from the very beginning, but just like, you got to peel away kind of like an onion, get to the middle, um, and then you realize all along that it was there.
Yes. But there may also be just the sense of comfort that one feels going to a temple or going to any number of spaces, and that comfort is what invokes that frequency,
Yeah.
right? And so there's no right or wrong, and there's no perfect definition for sacred space. It's knowing what it is as far as a concept, and then saying, okay, so that's the concept of what sacred space is. So what is it to me?
Mhm.
And then the next question is, why is that important? Right? If I know what it is as a concept and now I'm defining what it is for me, well, why does that matter? Right? Why do I need to have an understanding or an awareness of what sacred space is? So I'm asking you, how has sacred space played a part in your life and in your forward movement?
An immense amount. Mainly when I had the awareness of it for me being a frequency, because it means that it's something I can tap into at any time. It's something that I can embody at every level of myself, body, mind, emotion, and spirit. And it's something that I can also gift. And so to me, those are core aspects for that, for me, for like my personal journey, why this has been so important. And I love that I can have a sacred space that is is my own, but also can be shared. I feel like that's a beautiful thing because separation is an illusion in the first place. But it's also nice to have that feeling of, okay, let me pull back into my own space and let me reset, let me get my bearings or whatever it is. Let me give me time to reset or align. There's a lot of different variations and why someone might pull back into their own space. Um, but yeah, knowing that, having that awareness that it is for me a frequency, expanded the opportunity of what it could actually mean, and therefore expanded the why as well to a deeper level.
When you say expanded, because frequency is expansive, right? When you think about that, how did it expand things for you?
Mm.
If you can just help us understand, because I know the way that I connect and then start to play and explore is when someone can give me examples of their own experience, right?
Mhm.
Then I can go, oh, I had that experience, but I had no idea what I was navigating. So I let it be, and I've not revisited that again. But if I can see a shared common experience with someone and I get a little more around, oh, that's what that meant for you. Well, let me go back and pull that out of the memory play box and play with that again. Then sometimes it's helpful.
Yeah,
So, can you
absolutely.
share?
There's At first it kind of started. There's be a little. We're gonna weave this a little bit.
Let's weave
Let's
it.
leave it. At first, it was having the awareness of when and where I felt happiest. For me, it was home. It was in conversation and connection with friends. It was on the golf course. Um, when I started to notice, and there's more. Like, I love food, so just
In our kitchen.
yeah, just eating great food. So there's so many. I was like, why is it when I feel happy and I feel this? Why is that so? And they're very different. Those are all very different things, right? And even drive, I love to drive. I mean, you know that. Like, I love driving. It's like that's a safe, sacred space to me. It's like it's amazing. And so, why is that? What's the common thread and why? And the reason why it's important to highlight that is because prior to the awareness of it, I just thought it was something that happened to me, not because of me.
Mhm.
It's a very, very different. When things are happening to me, that means I don't have direction over. It's like, oh, I'm lucky that in this moment I'm feeling happy.
You're not
I'm
creating
not
or
creating.
co creating
Correct.
with intention.
Correct. And it's not empowerment at all.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, just everything is happening to me. And so I'm just lucky in this moment. And in other moments, I'm unlucky. Like, that was kind of my minimal outlook without spending a lot of time. I just hadn't spent a lot of time exploring it. When I started to notice the patterns more in that, then it helped me recognize, oh, well, the common thread is that yeah, I am in those spaces. I'm choosing to be happy. And so, yeah, the external is creating some kind of experience, but it's a co-creation with the universe. So whether I am on the golf course, whether I'm driving, or whether I'm with friends or eating food, or watching a movie, or being with you, and you know, uh, like all of these things, it's like I'm the common denominator in that, not from an egoic, selfish standpoint, but from an awareness standpoint that it's my opportunity to embody the frequency in which I desire to experience.
Yes. Which I think is paramount in the why, right? Why understand sacred space?
Yeah. Can I before you
Yeah.
dive into that, because I want to preface, and this is probably important, I should have. About a decade ago, I was really struggling with, having everything on paper that I could want and still be being unhappy. And this is what kind of initiated this. And it was the realization in Sedona in my first meditation, right? And I was like, here I am doing absolutely nothing, and I'm extremely happy. And why am I spending almost every ounce of my life in my waking moments attempting to make myself happy by just doing all these different things and filling my schedule and doing all these, it's like I didn't have a sacred space because I was just so scattered, and I was just attempting to grab onto anything that made me happy, uh, without awareness of how much of what I was doing was actually making me unhappy.
Yes.
And so I wanted to like make sure that was present into what you were going to bring up next, because I don't know what you're going to say, but I feel like
I think
this isn't
maybe.
scripted, like I feel like I know where you're going, and so I wanted to make sure that that was really clear, and so thank you for giving me that sacred space to share.
For adding it, because I
Yeah.
think I do feel like that lens too, the letting it go,
Mhm.
right? Because the why of understanding sacred space, no matter where we feel that alignment, once we understand the feeling of that alignment, then we begin to recognize if we bring our attention and intention to it, that we can recreate that in other places.
Mhm.
But we have to let go of the illusion of control and uh, embrace the awareness of direction and co creation, right? Because as you stated, you had everything on paper and you were just grabbing at things, thinking you were being battered around because you were attempting to control every situation and every person in every situation, because that's what we've been taught we do. When we begin to become very aware of sacred space and the alignment, and I'll use church because when I was young and I was going to church, I felt very at ease, very aligned, and I was not attempting to control the circumstances at church. It was more of a trust that all things were flowing as they were meant to flow. But that did not mean that I didn't direct my actions and interactions and create the experiences that I desired within that framework. Now carry that outside. If I have that same alignment and I apply that same principle, then I let go of this need to control anything. But I certainly still have my alignment across all aspects of myself. And I have the ability to say, how am I then going to direct and interact based on this alignment and create the experience that I want in this exchange? Or if I can't, which we're in co creation, so maybe I can't, then what can I learn from it and not be rocked by it?
Mm.
Right? Because I'm in a sacred space, I'm in my alignment. And in here, in this sacred space, nothing out here is going to throw me off.
Yeah, that's so well said. And it kind of dawned on me that maybe a better term, maybe a better, maybe not, but
Another term.
another term, a more approachable term could be authentic,
Hmm.
instead of sacred space. Like, what is the authentic space? Because again, there is this. Like, for me, it was so hard to bridge that gap between sacred and just feeling it had to be so formal.
Hmm.
And then I was like, oh well, I have to act a certain way because it's formal. There are limitations to who I can be and how I can show up given the formality of the situation. And so the way that you just described it, though, to me is not necessarily is not formal. It's honoring sacredness, or this being the sacred space through one's own authenticity, by choosing the frequency that they are.
Well, aren't you sacred just because you exist?
Yes. There you go.
I think we lose sight of that
Oh, very much
a
so.
lot.
Yeah, we've gotten into this society where we have to prove our worth,
Yeah.
and we have to prove we have to prove a certain thing in order. Like, I'll be happy when,
Hmm.
or I'll be successful when. Instead of, I'm happy, so from this space now I can do this or that, or I'm already successful in whatever that means to me, and so I can take that and apply that into whatever I desire to do.
And ultimately, when we look at sacred space, if we desire to call it anything else, that's still fine. It doesn't change the space,
Mhm.
right? You can call anything by anything. It is sacred because you're bringing your intention, your purpose, your awareness, and your focus to it. And the moment you do that, then you have made it sacred unto itself. And you are now creating from that space every step of the way in your own life. So for me, coming back to my sacred space is my heart. If I do ever feel thrown off, I come back to my sacred space, then my intention, my purpose, my awareness, my actions, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all come back to that heart center. And I start asking our favorite question, what would love do?
Mhm.
Right? And that in itself makes it sacred because it's sacred to me.
Mhm.
Now, we can amplify that and you can help me support my sacred space. And we can come together in a space in that same sacred intention, which then has us all holding the same sacred space. But whether we call that sacred space or we call that common space, it doesn't matter. It's what do we desire from this and what are we going to do with it,
Yeah,
right?
I love that. And you're so right that we do lose sight of our own sacredness. If we believe that we were either made by God, source, universe, whatever you want to call it, or we are a part of God's source, universe, whatever you want to call it.
Or even that we're just stardust.
Stardust, yeah,
It
that's
doesn't
still
matter. That's still
beautiful.
pretty
That's
epic.
still amazing. Yeah. Um, there, in essence, everything that we do has a level of sacredness because it is inherently divine. So when we bring more attention, when we pay attention to it, it's like we're investing into our own divinity. And so that's a beautiful thing. That's not, it's not like an egoic, I'm God kind of thing. It's like, no, I'm a part of this. And through this, I'm going to express all of my being, all of my authenticity, which is one in the universe. So I get to know myself, and the universe gets to know itself through all of that expression.
Yes.
And the more intention we have is like doubling down on that. It's just more stardust.
There you go. Little
Yeah.
sprinkles on
Yeah.
top. And you can have more than one sacred space,
Yeah.
as you mentioned.
Yeah.
There's more than one sacred location.
Mhm.
We could have more than one sacred space for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
That brings us into different feelings of alignment
Mhm.
because we are multifaceted beings, right? We have so many different layers to ourselves. So each sacred space may take us to different layers and levels within our own being,
Mhm.
within our own physical, within our own mental, emotional, within our own spiritual expression, right? So this is something to be played with. to be really explored, and it's going to change even, right? As you change and evolve and just experience yourself, your sacred spaces may change, and it could be incredibly fun to discover.
I agree.
So,
I love that. Yeah, and I love that you also brought, when we come together, there's multiple of us. That's like, hey, the divine in me sees the divine in you.
mhm.
And so that's an amplification to that point of what you were talking about. And so that intention is us kind of reinvesting into this knowing. It's a reminder, and it's a frequency that we can. I feel like we forget that the frequency that we hold, it does impact the collective. And there's that law of transmutation where higher vibration always trumps lower vibration. And so if we seek that higher vibration, that frequency, whether that's uh, love,
Joy,
joy,
bliss,
bliss,
enlightenment.
yes, but it could even just be, even in many ways, it could be as middle ground as neutrality.
Mhm.
But it could be excitement, in engaging, connected, empathetic, sympathetic. Just an awareness of something in that level. Then it's just, we actually can impact the collective and all raise that. And so the more of us that choose that on a regular basis, then that is the experience that a lot of us are having together. And so inherently, that makes the earth a sacred space. And I know there's like, oh well, this one place is sacred, or this one area. Well, why are we putting limits on the sacred spaces and places? When it's within us, it's outside of us, and it's all around us, and it's always. The only thing we ever experience is the now. Every moment we ever experienced in the past was a now moment. Every moment we'll experience in the future will be a now moment, and everything we're experiencing right now is a now moment. And so therefore, every now is sacred. And our ability to be present is accessing it at another level.
Yeah. So, are you saying that every now moment is a sacred space?
Yeah, I guess so. Yes, yes, I am. Should we choose?
And I think that is a beautiful place to sit in the beingness of that. And to thank you all for joining us on another episode of the Heart Leader podcast, where our hearts and our minds align. Just a reminder that as you are exploring your own sacredness, if that inner critic pops in there and wants to start telling you that you are not worthy of thinking of yourself as sacred, we have a resource that you can check out. We actually have an author copy that we can show you now. This is what the book will actually look like in paperback. So, if you would like to get on the wait list to be notified when you can pre order this book for silencing your inner critic, you can pop on over to silenceyourinnercritic.com and you can get on the wait list. As soon as you do, you'll get a gift from me that has 13 tips to start silencing that inner critic right away. And then we'll keep you notified all along the way of other fun things like courses and quick things that you can do to continue to hold that sacred space for yourself. Until then, continue to take a peek around right here where you are and enjoy more episodes of the Heart Leader podcast.